What would you do if you discovered your family's love for you was based on what you could give them? Austin had worked his entire life to earn his parents' love, but after hearing they took the money for his birthday party and gave it to his sister for a vacation, his world crumbled. But Grandma had different plans. Instead of letting him be another forgotten afterthought, she made sure he was celebrated. Will Austin finally get the recognition he deserves? Stay tuned to find out how he takes control, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories. My name's Austin, and I'm about to turn 20. Right now, I'm in the middle of finals week at college, buried under textbooks and empty coffee cups, studying finance. It's a tough major, but numbers have always been my thing. As I sit here in my dorm room, exhaustion weighing me down, my mind drifts to my birthday. My family's planning to celebrate it once my exams are over. Family celebrations? They've always left a bitter taste in my mouth. Growing up, I was always the black sheep. Dallas, my older sister, is 25 now, and she's always been the golden child, the one my parents doted on. Me? I was just an afterthought. I'll never forget when I was 8. It was Dallas's 13th birthday, and my parents threw her this huge party bouncy castle magician, a cake that was practically bigger than me. I remember feeling so excited, thinking my birthday would be just as grand. But when mine came around, all I got was a small grocery store cake and a pair of socks. I tried to hold it together, but I couldn't. The tears came, and my mom just patted my head, dismissing me with, "Don't be dramatic, Austin, it's just a birthday." That was the moment I realized I was different, less important somehow. As I got older, that feeling only grew. Dallas got the newest phone every year, while I inherited her old ones. She got designer clothes and I got hand-me-downs. When she graduated high school, my parents bought her a car. When I graduated, they handed me a gift card to the local bookstore. But there was one person who always made me feel special, my grandmother. She's always treated me differently. When I told her I wanted to study finance, she was thrilled. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Austin," she said. "You'll go far." And now she's insisted on arranging my birthday celebration. She even gave my parents several $1,000s to make it happen. I couldn't believe it. My parents usually brush off my birthdays, but this time they didn't argue. They just took the money and told me to focus on my exams. I overheard Dallas complaining about it. "Why does he get a big party?" she whined. "I could use that money for a trip I've been wanting to take." Grandma shut her down quickly. "Hush now, Dallas. Everyone spoils you as it is. Didn't I just give you 10 grand for rent and you're still living at home?" Dallas went silent after that. I'll admit, a small part of me felt a little smug. So here I am, cramming for my last exam. Tomorrow's the day, and then I'm free. Free to finally have a birthday celebration that's about me, for once. The next day, I walked out of my last exam feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My classmates were chattering excitedly about their summer plans, but all I could think about was the birthday celebration waiting for me. As I walked back to my dorm, my phone buzzed with messages from friends wishing me an early happy birthday, knowing I'd be heading home soon. It felt good to be remembered, even if they were people I'd only known for a couple of years. "Happy almost birthday!" Denver, my roommate, called as I walked into our shared space. "Ready for the big family shindig?" I nodded, trying to muster up some excitement. "Yeah, should be interesting." Denver raised an eyebrow. "You don't sound too excited. Everything okay?" I sighed, collapsing onto my bed. "It's just my family. They're not exactly the warm and fuzzy type, especially when it comes to me." "But your grandma organized this whole thing, right? That's got to count for something," Denver pointed out. "True," I admitted, my voice softer. "Grandma's always been different. She actually seems to like me." As I packed my backpack for the trip home, a nagging feeling twisted in my gut. It was a mix of hope and dread, hope that for once my birthday would be special, and dread that it would all go wrong. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. My mind kept wandering to what awaited me. Would the house be decorated? Would there be a cake? Would my parents actually look happy to see me? As I walked up the driveway, I took a deep breath. The house looked normal. No balloons, no streamers, nothing to indicate a celebration was about to happen. But maybe they were keeping it all inside, I thought, trying to stay positive. I opened the front door, calling out, "Mom?" Dad, I'm home. The house was quiet, too quiet for a place that was supposed to be prepping for a party. I frowned, dropping my backpack by the door and making my way to the living room. My parents were there, sitting on the couch, looking oddly uncomfortable. There was no sign of any party preparations. Hi, I said, confusion creeping into my voice. Where's all the, birthday stuff? My mom and dad exchanged a glance that made my heart sink. About that, Austin, my dad started, his voice oddly detached. We decided not to organize your birthday party. I blinked. Sure, I had misheard. What, but Grandma gave you money for it? We gave the money to Dallas for her trip, my mom cut in. She and her boyfriend flew to Hawaii a couple of days ago. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my eyes start to sting with tears. You what? But it was for my birthday. Grandma gave it to you for my birthday. My dad shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Dallas needed a vacation, you understand, don't you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Understand? No, I don't understand. It was supposed to be my birthday party. I invited people. What am I supposed to tell them? We've already taken care of that, my mom said, her tone dismissive. We called everyone and told them you were having problems with college and that the party was canceled. I stood there, shock giving way to anger. You lied to them about me? How could you do this? My dad's face hardened. That's enough, Austin. You need to learn to obey us and stop being so selfish. Selfish? I almost screamed the word. How am I being selfish? It was my birthday, my party. Just then, the front door opened. I turned, hoping it was Dallas back early and feeling guilty. Instead, I saw my grandmother step inside, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. What's going on here? She asked, her voice sharp. Where's the party? I looked at my parents, waiting to see how they'd explain this away. They hesitated, fumbling for words. In that moment, something in me snapped. There is no party, Grandma, I said, my voice shaking. They gave the money to Dallas for a trip to Hawaii instead. The look on my grandmother's face was one I'd never seen before. It was a mix of fury and disappointment, all directed at my parents. Is this true? She demanded. My parents couldn't meet her gaze. Their silence was all the confirmation she needed. Grandma turned to me, her expression softening. Austin, dear, go pack your things. You're coming with me. I didn't need to be told twice. As I rushed to throw some clothes into my backpack, I could hear my grandmother's voice, low and angry, talking to my parents. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. When I came back downstairs, Grandma was waiting by the door. Without a word to my parents, we left the house and got into her car. As we drove away, I finally let the tears fall. 20 years of feeling unloved and unwanted came pouring out. Grandma reached over and patted my hand. Don't you worry, dear, she said, her voice gentle but firm. We'll sort this out. You deserve better than this, and it's high time someone showed you that. Grandma drove us to her house, a beautiful 2-story home on the outskirts of town. As we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me with a determined look in her eyes. This might not be the party you were expecting, Austin, but we're going to celebrate your birthday properly. Once inside, Grandma immediately got on her phone. I watched in amazement as she ordered what sounded like enough food to feed an army, all for rush delivery. I hope you're hungry, she said with a wink as she hung up. We've got quite a feast coming our way. As we waited for the food to arrive, Grandma bustled around the kitchen, pulling out her best china and silverware. I offered to help, but she shooed me away. It's your birthday, dear. You just relax. So I sat at the kitchen table watching her work. After a few minutes of silence, I couldn't hold back anymore. Grandma, I started, my voice small. Why? Why don't they love me? She paused in her preparations, turning to face me with a sad look in her eyes. For a moment, she seemed to be wrestling with something internally. Then she sighed and sat down across from me. Oh, Austin, she said, reaching out to take my hand. I suppose it's time you knew the truth. My heart started racing. The truth about what? Grandma took a deep breath. Your parents, they didn't want you to be born. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs as if I'd been punched. What? They thought Dallas was enough. Grandma continued, her voice gentle but firm. But I convinced them to have you. Your mother, she had a difficult pregnancy and the birth was complicated. She almost died. I felt tears welling up in my eyes again. So it's my fault? No, Grandma said forcefully. No, Austin, it's not your fault at all. These things happen sometimes, but your mother, she tried to avoid you after that, and your father and Dallas followed her lead. I sat there stunned. All these years I'd known something was off, but I had never imagined this. Just then, the doorbell rang. Our food had arrived. As Grandma went to get it, I stayed there, trying to process everything I'd just learned. The next few hours blurred together. Grandma and I devoured an absurd amount of food. She shared stories from her youth, making me laugh despite the heaviness that still hung in my chest. As the night wore on, I began to relax, letting go of the tension for the first time in ages. I finally felt like I could enjoy my birthday. As we were finishing the last of the cake, Grandma's phone rang. She glanced at it, then at me, a glint of mischief dancing in her eyes. "It's your sister," she said. "Shall we see what she has to say?" Curiosity got the better of me. I nodded. Grandma put the phone on speaker. "Hello?" Dallas's voice came through, sounding frantic. "Grandma, why is my card blocked? What's going on?" Grandma's tone was cold, controlled. "Hello, Dallas. I see you've discovered there are consequences for your actions." "What? What actions? What are you talking about?" Dallas's voice was rising in pitch now. "Your behavior and that of your parents has been absolutely shameful," Grandma said, her voice steady but firm. "Taking money meant for your sister's birthday for your own selfish desires? I'm deeply disappointed in you." There was a long pause, then Dallas came back, her anger seeping through. "Oh, come on! Mom and Dad did the right thing giving me that money. Austin doesn't need some big party. You're just a crazy old woman, and who cares about that?" Grandma cut her off, her voice sharp as steel. "I've heard all I need to hear." And with that, she hung up. I stared at her, wide-eyed. "Grandma, did you really block her card?" She nodded, a small, satisfied smile tugging at her lips. "I did, and your parents' account too. It's time they learned to stand on their own 2 feet. As if on cue, the phone rang again. This time, it was my parents. Grandma ignored it, turning back to me as though nothing had just shaken the foundations of my family's finances. "Now then," she said, as casually as if we hadn't just detonated a bombshell. "How about we plan the rest of your birthday week?" The days with Grandma felt like a dream, a stark contrast to the nightmare that had been my birthday up until then. For the first time in forever, I felt truly loved and appreciated. We shopped, visited museums, and just basked in each other's company. But like all good things, it came to an end. Soon, it was time for me to return to my dorm and focus on my summer classes. As I unpacked my bags in my tiny dorm room, my phone buzzed relentlessly. I glanced at it and saw a flood of notifications, missed calls, and messages from my parents in Dallas. With a sigh, I sank onto my bed, scrolling through them. The first message was from my mom. "Austin, you need to talk to your grandmother right now. This is unacceptable." Then, my dad. "We're your parents. You owe us your loyalty. Make her unblock our accounts." Dallas's messages were even worse. "You little brat, is this what you wanted? To ruin everything for us? We're stuck in Hawaii because of you. Fix this now." My hands trembled as I read through them all. The audacity, the nerve they had to demand my help after everything they'd done. It was mind-boggling. I took a deep breath and typed my response. "This is between you and Grandma. I won't get involved. Please don't contact me about this again." I hit send and then blocked their numbers. But the peace didn't last long. They started calling from different numbers, leaving voicemails filled with demands and insults. One particularly nasty voicemail, which I foolishly answered, had my mother's words cutting deeper than any insult could. "You ungrateful little trash," she spat. "I should have never given birth to you. I should have had an abortion instead." That was the last straw. I ended the call and blocked every number they tried to reach me from. Tears streamed down my face as I curled into a ball on my bed, the weight of my mother's words echoing painfully in my mind. Over the next few weeks, I buried myself in my studies, using textbooks and assignments to drown out the pain. Occasionally, I'd call Grandma for comfort, her calm, confident voice grounding me. "How are you holding up, dear?" she'd ask, concern lacing her tone. "I'm okay, Grandma," I'd reply, my voice shaky despite my best efforts. "Just focusing on my classes." "That's my girl," she'd say, pride clear in her voice. "Remember, you're stronger than you know. Don't let them get to you." Her words were a balm to my battered soul, a reminder that I wasn't alone. While my parents and sister had shown their true colors, Grandma had become my rock, my safe harbor in this storm. It was a crisp autumn day, about 2 months after the birthday fiasco. I was walking across campus, my mind preoccupied with an upcoming finance exam, when I heard someone call my name. "Austin!" I turned and froze. There, jogging towards me with a $1,000,000 smile, was Vegas, my sister Dallas's boyfriend, the same Vegas who was with her in Hawaii. He was as handsome as ever, and I couldn't help but notice the envious glances from other girls as he approached. Before I could react, he swept me into a hug. I stood there stiff and confused. As he pulled away, still grinning, "Vegas, what are you doing here?" I managed to ask, acutely aware of the stares we were attracting. "I was hoping to run into you," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Can we talk? There's a cafe just off campus." Every instinct told me to say no, but curiosity got the better of me. "Okay, but I can't stay long." As we settled into a quiet corner of the cafe, Vegas leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "Austin, I need to tell you something important." I braced myself, expecting news about my family. What he said next, however, caught me completely off guard. "I want to date you," he blurted out, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I'm going to leave Dallas for you." I stared at him, mouth agape. "Vegas, what are you talking about? You're with my sister." He shook his head, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've been in love with you for a long time, Austin. I was only dating Dallas to be close to you. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true." As he spoke, my mind raced. This didn't make any sense. Vegas had never shown any interest in me before. In fact, he'd always seemed to barely notice my existence when he was around Dallas. Something fishy was definitely going on here. I decided to play along to see where this would lead. Forcing a shy smile, I said, "Wow, Vegas, that's really sweet. I had no idea you felt that way." "Mal." His face lit up, clearly encouraged by my response. "Really? So what do you think? Would you give us a chance?" I pretended to consider it, then said, "This is a lot to take in. Can I have some time to think about it? Maybe we could meet again in a week?" "Of course," Vegas agreed eagerly. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait for you, Austin." After he left, I remained at the cafe, sipping my coffee and turning the bizarre encounter over in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that this sudden declaration of love was connected to my grandmother's decision to cut off my family financially. But how and what did Vegas hope to gain? I had barely stepped out of the cafe, my head still spinning from Vegas's bizarre declaration, when my phone rang. My sister's name flashed on the screen. With a deep sigh, I answered. "You backstabbing little trash!" Dallas's voice screeched through the speaker. "How could you do this to me?" I pulled the phone away from my ear, wincing at her volume. "Dallas, what the hell are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb with me," you home-wrecking my patience snapped. "Shut up right now and explain what's going on, or I'm hanging up." There was a moment of stunned silence before Dallas spoke again, her voice trembling with rage. "Vegas just dumped me. He said he's going to date you instead. How could you?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What, Dallas? I swear I had no idea." "Oh, don't act all innocent," she spat. "I bet you're thrilled about this, aren't you? Well, guess what? He's only after you for Grandma's money." My mind reeled. "Grandma's money? What are you talking about?" Dallas let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, you don't know? Well, let me fill you in, little sister. Grandma's cutting Mom, Dad, and me out of her will. She's leaving everything to you." I leaned against a nearby wall, feeling dizzy. But why would she do that? Because she found out about Mom and Dad's plan, Dallas said, her voice dripping with resentment. They filed to have her declared mentally incompetent so they could take control of her assets. But the old bat caught wind of it somehow. I felt sick. They did what? You heard me, Dallas smeared. And now we're all cut off. Except for you, of course, the perfect little A's. The pieces started to fall into place. So, that's why Vegas suddenly wants to date me. Because of Grandma's money? Bingo, Dallas said with a sickening enthusiasm. Give the girl a prize. God, that vile old woman. I hope she... I cut him off, my voice ice cold. Don't you dare finish that sentence, Dallas. I don't know who's worse in this situation, you and our parents trying to steal from Grandma or Vegas for being a gold-digging snake. Dallas gasped. How dare you? No, how dare you? I shot back, fury boiling over. All of you, you're despicable. I don't want to talk to you anymore, Dallas. Don't ever call me again. I hung up, my hand shaking. The weight of anger and hurt crashed over me like a tidal wave, my chest tightening as tears threatened to spill. How could my family do this? How could they be so cruel, so greedy? With trembling fingers, I dialed Grandma's number. She picked up almost immediately, her voice warm and soothing, like a balm to my shattered nerves. Austin, dear, is everything all right? I inhaled deeply, trying to steady my shaking voice. Grandma, I just found out about, well, everything. The inheritance, Mom and Dad trying to declare you incompetent. Is it true? There was a brief pause, followed by a light chuckle from Grandma. Oh, my dear, I was wondering when you'd hear about all that drama. Yes, it's true. She went on to recount everything, her voice a mix of amusement and disappointment. You should have seen their faces when the commission showed up at my door. I invited them in for tea, answered all their questions, and even did a few Sudoku puzzles to prove my mental acuity. A smile tugged at my lips, imagining the scene. So, what happened? Well, Grandma continued, they left quite satisfied that I was of sound mind. Your parents' ridiculous claim was rejected, of course. After that, I had no choice but to protect my assets and you from their greed. I've left them the house, but the rest, well, that's all going to you, my dear. I was stunned. Grandma, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Austin. Just promise me you'll use it wisely. I want you to take over the company one day to build on what I've created. I promise, Grandma. I won't let you down. After that conversation, I threw myself into my studies, pouring everything I had into my future. The family I had once tried so hard to impress became strangers. I blocked their numbers and ignored their attempts to reach out. They had shown their true colors, and I wanted nothing more to do with them. A week after my conversation with Vegas, he came back just as he'd promised. But when his confident smile met the coldness in my eyes, it faltered. Austin, he began, reaching for my hand. I pulled away sharply. Save it, Vegas, I spat. I know all about your little scheme. You and my sister deserve each other. You're both vile and mercenary. His facade crumbled in an instant. You're making a big mistake, Shake, he sneered. You're a fool to refuse a guy like me. I couldn't help but laugh. A guy like you? A gold digger with no moral compass? No thanks. I think I'll pass. As he stormed off, a heavy weight lifted from my shoulders. I was free from the manipulation, the lies, the constant feeling of inadequacy that had weighed me down for so long. Over the next few months, Grandma took me under her wing. She taught me everything I needed to know about running a successful company. We spent weekends poring over financial reports, discussing business strategies, and planning for the future. You have a good head for business, Austin, she'd often say, beaming with pride. You're going to do great things. For the first time in my life, I felt truly valued, truly loved. The pain of losing my parents and sister still lingered, but it was overshadowed by the joy of finally finding my place in the world. What do you do when the people you've spent your whole life trying to impress finally show their true colors? When the family you thought would always have your back turns out to be nothing more than a group of selfish, manipulative people, Austin's journey is one of realization of finally seeing that the love and approval he so desperately craved from his family was never genuine. His birthday, which should have been a celebration of his life and achievements, became the final straw. His parents chose Dallas's trip over his special day, lying to everyone and dismissing him as always. But when Austin learned the truth from Grandma that she had protected him, leaving everything to him, he finally saw his worth, not through their eyes, but his own. And when Vegas came knocking, trying to manipulate Austin just like the rest of them, he saw through the facade. No longer the naive boy who was desperate for their love, Austin knew exactly what he had to do. He cut them off. And for the first time in his life, he was free. Now, Austin is not only free from his family's grasp, but is also building a future that's entirely his own. One where his grandmother's legacy will live on through him. So, here's the question. Would you have walked away from family who treated you like this? How far would you go to protect your own peace? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
The clinking of silverware against plates echoed through the dining room as our family gathered for another routine Sunday dinner. My husband, Caleb, chatted amiably with my niece, Lila, who had been staying with us for the weekend. The aroma of my famous pot roast filled the air, but little did I know that the evening's events would leave a far more pungent taste. "This is delicious, Aunt Meredith," Lila said, taking another bite. "It's been so long since I've had a home-cooked meal like this." "Thank you, sweetie," I replied with a smile, savoring the moment of normalcy amidst the chaos that was about to unfold. Caleb nodded in agreement, his mouth full. "Your aunt's a fantastic cook. You should come over more often." Lila's gaze dropped, her expression turning somber. "I'm not sure if that's such a good idea." An uneasy silence settled over the table. Caleb and I exchanged a puzzled glance, sensing the shift in Lila's demeanor. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, reaching across the table to touch her hand. Lila's eyes welled up with tears, and she let out a shuddering breath. "I can't keep this a secret anymore. Dad, he's been doing something illegal at work." The words hung heavy in the air, like a suffocating fog. Caleb's brow furrowed, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. "What do you mean, illegal?" He probed gently. Lila's trembling hands gripped the table's edge. "He's been embezzling money from the company. I overheard him talking about it on the phone with someone." My heart sank, and a wave of nausea washed over me. My own brother Derek, stealing from the very company that employed us both? It seemed too outrageous to be true, and yet Lila's distress left little room for doubt. "Are you sure about this, Lila?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "I wouldn't lie about something like this, Aunt Meredith. He's been acting strange for months, always stressed and spending money like it's going out of style. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the evidence is staring us right in the face." Caleb reached across the table, clasping Lila's hand in a reassuring gesture. "We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise. Your dad's going to have to answer for his actions, but we'll make sure you and your mom are taken care of." As the gravity of the situation sank in, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. Derek was my own flesh and blood, someone I had trusted implicitly. Now, his actions threatened to tear our family apart, and I found myself caught in the crosshairs of a battle I never saw coming. The pot roast lay untouched, its once tantalizing aroma now a bitter reminder of the harsh reality that had invaded our home. As Layla's confession echoed in my mind, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I could barely sleep that night, Lila's revelation replaying in my mind like a broken record. How could Derek, my own brother, be capable of such deceit? As morning light crept through the curtains, I resolved to confront him and get to the bottom of this mess. Caleb insisted on coming with me, his jaw set in a grim line. He's not going to like what we have to say, but he needs to face the consequences of his actions. We arrived at Derek's upscale suburban home, the extravagance of it all now glaringly conspicuous. Caleb rang the doorbell, and after a few moments Derek answered, his face falling when he saw us. "Meredith? Caleb, what brings you two here so early?" he asked, eyes darting between us suspiciously. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "We need to talk, Derek. It's about the company." His expression hardened and he stepped back, ushering us inside. "What about it?" "Don't play dumb, Derek," Caleb interjected, his tone stern. "Lila told us everything. The embezzlement, the illegal activities, it all ends now." Derek's face contorted with rage, and he slammed his fist against the wall. "That little brat! How dare she stick her nose where it doesn't belong?" "She's your daughter, Derek," I cried, appalled by his callous reaction. "How could you put your own family at risk like this?" He whirled towards me, his eyes wild. "Don't you dare lecture me about family, Meredith. You have no idea what I've had to do to provide for all of you." "By stealing? By breaking the law?" Caleb's voice boomed, his composure fraying. "You've not only betrayed your company, but also your own flesh and blood." Derek let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Says the man who made a career out of locking people up. You're no better than I am, Caleb." The tension in the room was palpable, like a coiled spring ready to snap. I placed a hand on Caleb's arm, silently pleading with him to remain calm. "We're not here to fight, Derek," I said, my voice trembling. "We just want the truth." Derek's shoulders sagged, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of remorse in his eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "Fine, you want the truth?" he spat. "I did what I had to do to keep this family afloat. After the divorce, I was drowning in debt, and the company was my only lifeline. You think they would have cared if I went under? If Lila and her mother ended up on the streets?" His words hung in the air, a twisted justification for his crimes. Caleb shook his head, his jaw clenched. "That doesn't make it right, Derek. You've broken the law, and there will be consequences." Derek's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. "You're not going to do anything, Caleb. Not if you know what's good for you and your precious little family." The veiled threat hung heavy between us, and I felt a chill run down my spine. In that moment, I realized that the brother I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a man consumed by greed and desperation. As we left Derek's house, the weight of his actions bearing down on us, I couldn't help but wonder if we had just opened Pandora's box, and what horrors might lie ahead. Derek's thinly veiled threat hung over us like a dark cloud as we left his house. Caleb's jaw was set in a grim line, his knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. "That arrogant son of a—" he muttered under his breath, his words trailing off into a frustrated sigh. I placed a hand on his arm, trying to calm him. "Caleb, what are we going to do? He's not going to just roll over and admit his guilt." Caleb's eyes met mine, a steely determination burning within them. "Then we'll make him. I'm not going to let that scumbag get away with what he's done." In that moment, I saw a glimpse of the tenacious prosecutor Caleb had once been, a man who wouldn't rest until justice was served. "Where do we start?" I asked, my voice wavering slightly. "We start by gathering evidence," Caleb replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Anything we can find that proves Derek's involvement in this embezzlement scheme." The days that followed were a whirlwind of covert investigation. Caleb pored over financial records, cross-referencing dates and transactions, building an ironclad case against my brother. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, as if I were betraying my own flesh and blood. "I know this is hard for you, Meredith," Caleb said one evening, his voice softer than usual. "But Derek made his choices, and now he has to face the consequences." I nodded, fighting back tears. He's my brother, Caleb. How could he do something like this?" Caleb reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "Greed can make even the most trusted people do terrible things, but we can't let that blind us to the truth." As the evidence mounted, a clearer picture began to emerge. Derek had been systematically siphoning funds from the company for years, using his position to cover his tracks. But it wasn't just the money. He had also been manipulating and threatening those closest to him, including his estranged wife, Elise, and their daughter, Lila. "That bastard," Caleb growled, slamming his fist on the table as we reviewed the latest findings. "He's been holding Elise and Lila hostage this whole time, using their fear and his control over their finances to keep them quiet. I felt sick to my stomach, the depth of Derek's depravity hitting me like a ton of bricks. This was no longer just about embezzlement. It was about protecting my family from a man who had descended into a pit of moral corruption. Caleb's eyes met mine, his gaze unwavering. We have to stop him, Meredith, no matter what it takes. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. Derek had made his choices, and now it was up to us to make ours, to stand up against his wickedness and bring him to justice, no matter the cost. As the days wore on, the weight of Derek's crimes began to take its toll. At work, whispers and sideways glances followed me through the corridors, my connection to the unfolding scandal like a scarlet letter. "How could you not have known, Meredith?" Janet, a coworker, asked one day, her voice dripping with judgment. I clenched my fists, biting back the urge to lash out. My brother's actions are his own. I had no idea he was capable of such deceit. Janet shook her head, her lips pursed. "Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?" The comment stung, and I fought back tears as I retreated to my office, slamming the door behind me. How dare she insinuate that I was somehow complicit in Derek's crimes? The ringing of my phone startled me, and I snatched it up, struggling to compose myself. "Hello? Aunt Meredith?" It was Lila, her voice trembling. "I need your help." My heart sank, and a wave of dread washed over me. "What's wrong, honey?" "It's Dad," she choked out between sobs. "He found out I told you and Uncle Caleb everything. He's furious, and he's threatening to cut me off completely." I could feel the anger bubbling within me, a protective instinct kicking in. "That bastard," I growled. "Don't worry, Lila. We'll take care of this." Hanging up, I wasted no time in calling Caleb, relaying the situation with urgency. His voice was grim, but resolute. "I'll be right there. We're not letting him get away with this anymore." Within the hour, Caleb was at my office, his expression thunderous. He pulled me into a fierce embrace, and I could feel the tension radiating off him. "That son of a bitch has gone too far," he seethed. "Threatening his own daughter like that, it's unforgivable." I nodded, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "We have to stop him, Caleb, before he hurts Lila or anyone else." The drive to Derek's house was a blur, my mind racing with a million different scenarios. What would we find when we got there? Would Derek be reasonable, or would his desperation drive him to new lows? The moment we stepped onto his doorstep, the air was thick with hostility. Derek flung open the door, his face contorted with rage. "What do you two want now?" he spat, his eyes darting between us. Caleb stepped forward, his stance unwavering. "We're here to put an end to your little charade, Derek. The threats, the manipulation, it all stops now." Derek's laughter was like nails on a chalkboard. "Or what? You'll throw me in jail? You don't have the guts, Caleb." In a flash, Caleb had Derek pinned against the wall, his forearm pressed against his throat. "Don't test me, Derek. I won't let you hurt my family anymore." The venom in Caleb's voice sent a chill down my spine, but I knew he was right. We had reached our breaking point, and there was no turning back. As Derek struggled against Caleb's grip, his eyes met mine, and in that moment I saw the true depth of his depravity. This was no longer the brother I had known and loved. This was a monster, consumed by greed and willing to crush anyone who stood in his way. The die was cast, and the battle lines were drawn. It was us against Derek, a fight for survival and redemption. And as I watched the two men grapple, I knew that no matter the outcome, our lives would never be the same again. The confrontation with Derek had been a stark wake-up call, a reminder that we were dealing with a man who had fully embraced his own depravity. As Caleb and I regrouped, the weight of the task before us seemed more daunting than ever. "We can't take him on alone," Caleb said, his brow furrowed in thought. "He's too desperate, too willing to cross any line to protect himself." I nodded, my mind already racing with possibilities. "What about Elise? She's been living under his thumb for years. She might be willing to help us bring him down." Caleb's eyes lit up, a glimmer of hope flickering in their depths. "That's brilliant, Meredith. If we can get her on our side, it'll be a major blow to Derek's defenses." Reaching out to Elise was a delicate process, shrouded in secrecy to protect her from Derek's wrath. But when we finally met, the pain and resentment in her eyes were palpable. "That bastard has made my life a living hell," she spat, her knuckles white from gripping the table. He's threatened me, controlled every aspect of my existence, all to keep me quiet about his little schemes. Caleb leaned forward, his voice low and reassuring. Not anymore, Elise. We're going to stop him, but we need your help. The fire in Elise's eyes was unmistakable, a burning desire for justice that had been simmering for far too long. Whatever it takes, she said firmly. I'm done living in fear. With Elise on board, the pieces began to fall into place. Caleb's contacts from his days as a prosecutor proved invaluable as we slowly built a network of allies, disgruntled employees, forensic accountants, anyone who could help us unravel the tangled web of Derek's crimes. But as our efforts intensified, so did Derek's desperation. Lila reported increasingly erratic behavior, outbursts of rage, and thinly veiled threats. It was clear that he was starting to sense the noose tightening around him. We have to be careful, Caleb warned during one of our clandestine meetings. Derek's like a caged animal right now, and there's no telling how far he'll go to protect himself. The tension was palpable, a constant undercurrent of danger lurking beneath the surface. But we were resolved, united in our determination to bring Derek's reign of terror to an end. Late one night, as I sat poring over financial records, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was one of Caleb's contacts, his voice laced with urgency. We've got him, the man said breathlessly. Ironclad evidence of fraud, money laundering, the whole 9 yards. It's time to make our move. I felt a rush of adrenaline, the moment we'd been working towards finally within reach. Quickly, I relayed the news to Caleb and our team, setting the wheels in motion for the final confrontation. As I looked around the room at the determined faces of our allies, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and gratitude. We had started this journey alone, but now we were a force to be reckoned with, a band of unlikely heroes united against a common enemy. Derek's downfall was imminent, and as we prepared for the final showdown, I knew that no matter the outcome, we had already won a victory. We had refused to cower in fear, and we had built a network of allies strong enough to take on even the most formidable foe. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on the ultimate act of reckoning. Derek's reign of terror was coming to an end, and we were ready to face him head-on, armed with the truth and a resolve that could not be broken. The day of reckoning had arrived, and the air was thick with tension as we gathered in the conference room at Caleb's law firm. Elise sat beside me, her hands trembling slightly, while Lila fidgeted nervously in her chair. The weight of what was about to transpire hung heavy over us all. Caleb entered the room, a grim expression etched onto his face. It's time, he said, his voice low and resolute. We followed him down the corridor, our footsteps echoing off the walls like a funeral march. As we approached the boardroom, the muffled sounds of raised voices filtered through the doors. Derek was already inside, surrounded by members of the company's board. Caleb paused, turning to face us. Remember, no matter what happens in there, we stay calm and focused. This is our chance to bring Derek's reign of terror to an end, once and for all. With a deep breath, he pushed open the doors, and we filed into the room. Derek's eyes widened in surprise, his gaze flickering between us and the board members. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, his voice dripping with disdain. One of the board members, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Whitmore, fixed him with a steely glare. We've been made aware of some rather disturbing allegations against you, Mr. Reynolds. Allegations of embezzlement, fraud, and misconduct. Derek scoffed, his lips curling into a sneer. Preposterous. These are nothing more than baseless accusations from disgruntled employees and family members with personal vendettas. Caleb stepped forward, a thick file clutched in his hand. I'm afraid the evidence speaks for itself, Derek. Bank records, financial statements, eyewitness accounts. It all points to a systematic and calculated effort to siphon funds from this company for your own personal gain. The color drained from Derek's face as Caleb began presenting the damning evidence, each document and testimony like a nail in the coffin of his deceit. You've been living a lie, Derek, Caleb said, his voice ringing out in the silent room. And not just with this company, but with your own family as well. Elise rose to her feet, her eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and resolve. He's right. For years, Derek has manipulated and threatened me, using our finances as a weapon to keep me silent about his misdeeds. Lila followed suit, her voice trembling but resolute. He's even turned on me, his own daughter, when I discovered the truth about his crimes. Derek's eyes darted around the room, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before our eyes. "This is absurd," he sputtered, his face flushed with rage. "You have no proof, no concrete evidence." But Caleb was ready, producing a final damning piece of evidence. A recorded phone conversation between Derek and one of his co-conspirators, detailing the intricate web of fraud and money laundering. As the recording played, the silence in the room was deafening, a palpable sense of shock and disbelief hanging in the air. When the final words faded, Derek slumped back in his chair, defeated. The weight of his crimes had finally caught up to him, and there was nowhere left to run. Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat, her gaze fixed on Derek with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented here today, the board has no choice but to terminate your employment with this company, effective immediately." Derek's head snapped up, his eyes wild and desperate. "You can't do this. I built this company from the ground up." But his protests fell on deaf ears as the board members turned their backs on him, one by one. In that moment, I saw the true depth of Derek's fall, a once powerful man reduced to a pathetic, sniveling mess, his lies and betrayals laid bare for all to see. As security escorted him from the building, Caleb placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Meredith," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Justice has been served." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders, but the victory was bittersweet. Derek's downfall had come at a great personal cost, tearing our family apart and exposing the darkest corners of human greed and depravity. But as I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by us, Elise, Lila, our allies in the shadows, I knew that we had emerged from this ordeal stronger, united by a shared commitment to truth and accountability. The path ahead would be long and difficult, but in that moment, I knew that we had taken the first steps towards redemption, towards healing the wounds that Derek had inflicted upon us all. The aftermath of Derek's downfall was a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media scrutiny. As the details of his crimes made headlines, the public outrage was palpable, a collective sense of betrayal and disbelief that someone in such a position of power could stoop to such depravity. Through it all, Caleb stood by my side, a steadfast pillar of strength and unwavering determination. "We're not done yet," he would remind me, his jaw set in a grim line. Derek needs to face the full consequences of his actions, and face them he did. The criminal charges came swiftly, a laundry list of offenses that would make even the most hardened criminal wince: fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and more. As the court proceedings unfolded, the extent of Derek's deception was laid bare, each revelation more shocking than the last. Elise took the stand, her testimony detailing the years of emotional and financial abuse she had endured at Derek's hands. "He made me feel like a prisoner in my own life," she said, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Always dangling the threat of financial ruin over my head, using our daughter as leverage to keep me in line." Lila's testimony was equally damning, painting a picture of a man so consumed by greed and ambition that he was willing to sacrifice his own family on the altar of his desires. As the evidence mounted, Derek's arrogance slowly crumbled, his once boastful demeanor replaced by a sullen, defeated hunch. When the guilty verdict was finally read, a hush fell over the courtroom, the weight of the moment almost palpable. "Derek Reynolds, you have been found guilty on all counts," the judge intoned, his voice ringing out like a death knell. "In light of the severity of your crimes and the devastating impact they have had on countless lives, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in a federal penitentiary." The words hung in the air, a collective sigh of relief and vindication rippling through the room. Derek's face was ashen, his eyes vacant, as the reality of his situation finally set in. In the days that followed, Caleb worked tirelessly to ensure that Elise and Lila were provided for, securing a substantial divorce settlement and financial compensation for the years of anguish they had endured. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but an important one nonetheless. As for me, the weight of Derek's betrayal still hung heavy on my heart. He was my brother, my own flesh and blood, and yet he had shown no hesitation in sacrificing everything: our family, our bond, our trust in pursuit of his own selfish desires. "You did the right thing, Meredith," Caleb would remind me, his arms wrapped around me in a comforting embrace. "Derek made his choices, and now he's facing the consequences." And slowly, gradually, I began to heal. The wounds inflicted by Derek's actions were deep, but with the love and support of Caleb, Elise, and Lila, I found the strength to move forward, to reclaim the pieces of my life that had been shattered. It was during one of our regular family dinners, a ritual we had re-established in the wake of Derek's downfall, that I finally found a sense of closure. As we gathered around the table, the laughter and warmth a stark contrast to the darkness we had endured, I looked around at the faces of those I loved most. Elise, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of freedom and empowerment. Lila, her smile radiant and unencumbered by the weight of her father's sins. And Caleb, my rock, my unwavering source of strength and love. In that moment, I realized that while Derek had tried to tear us apart, he had ultimately failed. Our bonds had been tested, but they had emerged stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our collective resolve. As I raised my glass, a sense of gratitude washed over me. "To family," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "and to the journey that has brought us here, stronger and more resilient than ever before." The echoes of agreement filled the room, a testament to the power of love and perseverance in the face of even the darkest of trials. Derek's fate was sealed, his legacy one of greed and betrayal. But for us, a new chapter was unfolding, one filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of brighter days ahead. The days leading up to Derek's sentencing were a whirlwind of emotions. Caleb and I had spent countless hours preparing our victim impact statements, poring over every detail, every heartache Derek had inflicted upon us. "This is our chance to have our voices heard," Caleb said, his brow furrowed in concentration, "to make sure Derek understands the true gravity of his actions." When the day finally arrived, the courtroom was packed, a sea of faces eager to witness the final act of reckoning. Derek was led in, his once imposing figure now diminished, his eyes downcast and hollow. As I took the stand, my hands trembled, but my voice was steady, fueled by a deep well of resolve. "Derek Reynolds was once my brother, my own flesh and blood," I began, my words ringing out in the hushed courtroom. "But the man who sits before us today is a stranger, a shell of the person I once knew and loved." I recounted the pain, the betrayal, the utter devastation Derek's actions had wrought upon our family, how his greed had nearly torn us apart, leaving scars that may never fully heal. "You had everything, Derek," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "A loving family, a successful career, a life that so many would envy. And yet, it wasn't enough. Your insatiable greed drove you to sacrifice it all, to burn every bridge and crush anyone who stood in your way." Derek's eyes remained fixed on the floor, his jaw clenched, but I could see the flicker of shame in his expression. When it was Caleb's turn, he did not hold back, his words lashing out like whips against Derek's battered ego. "You are a coward, Derek Reynolds," Caleb said, his voice dripping with disdain. "A selfish, manipulative coward who thought he could bend the world to his will, consequences be damned." He recounted the threats, the emotional and financial abuse Derek had inflicted upon Elise and Lila, his own daughter. "What kind of man does that?" Caleb thundered. "What kind of soulless monster preys upon his own family for personal gain?" Derek flinched, his hands balling into fists, but he remained silent, his head bowed in silent submission. As the judge handed down Derek's sentence, 25 years with no possibility of parole, a sense of finality settled over the courtroom. It was done. The monster had been caged, and justice had been served. In the weeks that followed, a strange sense of calm descended upon our lives. The storm had passed, leaving us battered but ultimately stronger for having weathered it together. Elise and Lila found solace in their newfound freedom, slowly rebuilding their lives from the ashes of Derek's destruction. Lila, in particular, blossomed, her smile radiant and unencumbered by the weight of her father's sins. "It's like a weight has been lifted," she confided in me one day, her eyes shining with hope. "I can finally breathe again, without the constant fear of his wrath hanging over me." As for Caleb and me, our bond had been forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by our shared commitment to truth and justice. We had faced the darkness head-on and emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. It was during one of our regular family dinners that I truly felt the weight of what we had endured and what we had overcome. As we gathered around the table, the laughter and warmth a stark contrast to the darkness we had faced, I looked around at the faces of those I loved most. Elise, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of freedom and empowerment. Lila, her smile radiant and unencumbered by the weight of her father's sins. And Caleb, my rock, my unwavering source of strength and love. In that moment I realized that while Derek had tried to tear us apart, he had ultimately failed. Our bonds had been tested, but they had emerged stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our collective resolve. As I raised my glass, a sense of gratitude washed over me. To family, I said, my voice thick with emotion, and to the journey that has brought us here, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The echoes of agreement filled the room, a testament to the power of love and perseverance in the face of even the darkest of trials. Derek's fate was sealed, his legacy one of greed and betrayal. But for us, a new chapter was unfolding, one filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of brighter days ahead. You should have handed over control when Dad passed. Brielle's voice cut through the noise like a knife through butter. This is our chance to sell and make a real profit. My heart stuttered as I peered around the corner, spotting my cousin deep in conversation with Ethan, my fiancé of 3 years. They huddled near the bar, oblivious to my eavesdropping presence at our winery's annual harvest party. I'm in, Ethan murmured with a solemn nod. We'll tell Avery after securing the deal. She won't be able to refuse once the money's on the table. Bile rose in my throat as the truth slammed into me. My own family, my supposed loved ones, plotting to steal away my father's life's work, everything I'd sacrificed to preserve. Trembling, I stormed away, desperate for space to process the gut-wrenching betrayal. Tears blurred my vision as I fled through the vineyard's rows, the muffled sounds of celebration fading behind me. How could they? After all the blood, sweat, and tears I'd poured into this place, into keeping Dad's dream alive. And Ethan? The man I'd planned to marry, willing to strip me of my legacy for profit. The vines stretched endlessly in every direction, mirroring the tangled maze of shock and rage clawing at my chest. I stumbled forward, uncaring of the twigs snagging my dress or the chill night air whipping across my face. It wasn't until I reached the secluded corner where Dad's favorite rosebush grew that I finally crumpled to the ground in anguished sobs. The petals glistened with dew, oblivious to my shattering world. After several ragged breaths, determination replaced despair. I wouldn't go down without a fight. Not while a single drop of my father's spirit flowed through these vines. If Ethan and Brielle wanted a war for the winery's soul, they'd soon discover I possessed more metal than they could ever fathom. Fueled by righteous fury, I rose and marched with renewed purpose back toward the celebration. Ethan and Brielle would never see the tempest brewing behind my controlled smile as I rejoined the crowd. Let them bask in their misguided confidence. It would make their downfall all the more catastrophic. I was the master of this vineyard, and by night's end, I'd have the perfect scheme to protect Dad's legacy at all costs. In the days following the harvest party, I played the role of the oblivious fiancé to perfection. Ethan remained affectionate, his gentle kisses and soft caresses mere rehearsed performances masking his deceit. "How was your meeting with the marketing team?" he asked over dinner one evening, his hazel eyes betraying not a glimmer of guilt. I forced a smile. "Productive. We've got some exciting new campaigns in the works." Ethan nodded, shoveling a forkful of pasta into his mouth. "That's great, babe. I know how hard you've been working to take the winery to new heights." The blatant hypocrisy nearly made me gag. While he spouted meaningless platitudes, I secretly gathered evidence, piecing together the full extent of his treachery with Brielle. Tapping into the winery's financial records and encrypted communications, I discovered their embezzlement stretched back months, funds they'd been funneling into an offshore account. Printouts detailing dozens of wire transfers lay scattered across my office desk like damning puzzle pieces. My blood boiled as I connected their illicit money trail to meetings with corporate bigwigs, vultures eager to devour my family's legacy. You lying, grasping snakes, I seethed through gritted teeth. The office door creaked open, and Lucia, my most trusted employee, stepped in with a concerned frown. "Everything okay, Miss Connors?" I waved her inside and gestured to the documents. "See for yourself. My dear fiancé and cousin have been stabbing us in the back for months, setting up a sale to that blood-sucking conglomerate we've been fighting off." Lucia's eyes widened in horror as she scanned the records. "Those maneuvers, how could they?" "Greed and self-preservation," I spat. "Ethan's likely counting on making me the rank-and-file winery bitch once the deal is done." I slammed my fist on the desk, delighting in Lucia's startled flinch. "But they're gravely mistaken if they think I'll roll over without bringing the entire facade crumbling down on their heads." Lucia swallowed hard, her voice wavering. "What are you going to do?" A wicked grin stretched across my face as the seeds of vengeance took root. "I'm going to remind them why you don't dispense with honor among thieves." The next morning, I strode into Marcia Blackwood's prestigious law office, evidence folder in hand. If anyone could help dismantle Ethan and Brielle's underhanded scheme, it was Marcia, a brilliant legal shark with a reputation for devouring corporate sleazeballs. "Miss Connors," her assistant ushered me inside. "Miss Blackwood is expecting you." I found the renowned attorney studying a stack of documents behind her imposing mahogany desk. Razor-sharp eyes scrutinized me over the rim of her glasses as I approached. "You certainly have a flair for dramatic entrances," Marcia said dryly. "I hope, for your sake, you've brought me something substantial." Wordlessly, I handed over the folder and waited as she flipped through the incriminating paperwork. Bank statements, encrypted emails, everything I'd compiled on the betrayal. Marcia's practiced mask of stoicism slipped, her eyebrows arching in disbelief. "This is unbelievable. Your own family conspiring against you in broad daylight." I stifled the urge to snap. Try having that realization slap you across the face. Instead, I simply nodded. "Can you help me take them down?" My voice remained steady, devoid of the raging storm churning beneath my composed exterior. "I want to bury Ethan and Brielle under the full weight of legal and public retribution." A predatory glint flickered in Marcia's eyes, the look of a tiger scenting blood on the wind. "Oh, I'll do more than that, Miss Connors. By the time we're through, their reputations and freedom will be torn asunder. They'll be left destitute, forced to slink away from this valley with their tails between their legs." My lips curved into a vindictive smile, already envisioning the devastation I'd rain down upon the traitorous snakes slithering in my midst. Over the ensuing days, Marcia and I constructed an impenetrable counteroffensive, rallying allies in preparation to obliterate Ethan and Brielle's scheme. Anthony, my winery's head vintner, eagerly supplied information to undermine their corporate dealings. Jackson, our top sales rep, helped divert funds and reroute profitable distribution contracts. Kara in marketing launched a campaign showcasing our heritage and community ties, the very soul they aimed to ravage for profit. With each ally recruited and asset secured, the day of reckoning crept inexorably closer. Ethan and Brielle carried on clueless, their arrogance blinding them to the crumbling ground beneath their feet. I could hardly wait to cement the trapdoor's collapse and revel in their pathetic, well-deserved downfall. The first strike hit with precise, surgical brutality. This just in. Financial records have surfaced exposing embezzlement and corporate fraud at Connor Family Vineyards, the local news anchor announced in a grave tone. Sources indicate Chief Marketing Officer Ethan Baxter and Deputy Manager Brielle Evans have been funneling company assets into overseas accounts for personal gain. I watched with wicked satisfaction as the damning report flashed on the TV, my finger hovering over the pause button. Frozen on screen, Ethan and Brielle's faces contorted in horror. A perfect captured memory. In the ensuing days, a merciless barrage of legal filings and media leaks descended upon the conspirators. Marcia worked tirelessly, slapping them with criminal charges while ensuring every salacious allegation dominated headlines. Ethan confronted me in a heated parking lot showdown, his usually polished veneer cracked and disheveled. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded through clenched teeth, eyes wild and desperate. "We were going to set you up with a nice payoff, more than enough to retire comfortably." I laughed in his face, loud and mocking. and let you thieves bleed my father's legacy dry? Spend his life's work on foosball tables and degenerate thrill-seeking? The venom in my tone seemed to shrink him before my very eyes. You deluded yourself into thinking I'd just hand over the keys and walk away once the money hit my account, that I'd forsake my responsibilities, my duties as Connor heir. Poking his chest with each enunciated word, I leaned until our faces were mere inches apart. You miscalculated. Badly. Ethan recoiled, his expression incredulous. So that's it? You'd rather watch everything burn than compromise? Meeting his gaze with frigid certainty, I replied, some legacies are worth martyring over. With that, I spun on my heel and strutted away, leaving him to stew in his shattered delusions. The next phase hit hard and fast, a series of surgical strikes systematically sabotaging Ethan and Brielle's corporate dealings. One by one, their underhanded business negotiations unraveled in spectacular fashion. Within days, the Vineyard conglomerate abruptly pulled their buyout offer after our PR blitzkrieg portrayed us as a historic community anchor, the embodiment of Napa's proud heritage they'd never uproot without a customer backlash. All its posturing about market share and consolidation swiftly crumbled in the face of such toxic optics. Other potential investors fled like scattering roaches in the light, terrified of being labeled corporate pillagers. With their options dwindling, Ethan and Brielle found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn, each frantic move, born of arrogance and desperation, easily anticipated and deflected. Soon they'd have nowhere left to squirm except directly into the pit of consequences I'd meticulously excavated. I could already envision them dangling on the precipice, one fateful shove from total disgrace and ruin. With Ethan and Brielle's scheme to sell the winery lying in ruins, it was time to set the final stage for my grand defiance. I'd lured the snakes into a corner, now to spring the trap and crush them beneath my heel once and for all. The annual Winemakers Charity Gala presented the perfect opportunity. A high-profile event with investors, media, and industry bigwigs from across the valley in attendance. Precisely the backdrop I needed to thoroughly humiliate the treacherous fools threatening my legacy. You wanted to speak with me? Ethan sidled up beside me, his expression a pathetic mask of defeat and confusion. Behind him, Brielle hovered nearby, shoulders slumped in dejected resignation. I regarded them both with callous appraisal. Yes, there's an important matter we need to discuss at the gala tonight, a major announcement regarding the winery's future. Ethan's brow furrowed as he processed my words. You mean? Exactly. I allowed a calculated pause, lips curving into a razor-thin smile. I think it's time I abdicated control and allowed the next generation to steer Connor Vineyards forward, with all our supporters present to bear witness. His features slackened in apparent relief, and I had to stifle a derisive snort. If only he knew the profound depths of his delusion. I don't know what to say, he stammered out. Thank you for finally seeing reason, Avery. I promise Brielle and I will make you proud with the new direction. Save your platitudes. I cut him off with a dismissive wave. Just be prepared to embrace your role on the stage tonight. It'll be a performance neither of you will ever forget. As the gala commenced a few hours later, tension simmered just beneath the celebratory surface. Ethan and Brielle worked the crowds with artificial cheer, confidence buoyed by hubris and ignorance. They fully expected this evening to mark their ascension as winery overloads, a private victory party attended by the entire valley's elite. Little did the self-deluded fools realize the event heralded loss-doomed downfall, orchestrated by the very woman they sought to disenfranchise. Their humiliation would be gloriously public, a final legacy-staining trauma to complement the mountain of legal consequences still to come. Enjoying the evening? I sidled up to them with 2 fresh glasses of crisp Chardonnay, every inch the gracious hostess. Brielle accepted her drink, green eyes glinting with avarice. It's just the start of many more to come under our management. About that. I raised my glass in preparation for a toast. I believe I promised a special announcement tonight. Ethan's face broke into an eager grin, gobbling up the bait with reckless desperation. You finally saw the light. We're ready to lead the winery into a new prosperous era. Seizing the moment, I strode up onto the stage and seized the microphone, my voice amplifying across the hushed ballroom with authority. Esteemed guests, as many of you know, this gala celebrates not just the year's harvest, but the bonds of community, heritage, and family. I paused, letting the pregnant silence saturate the air like a heavy fog. Therefore, it is with great dismay I must reveal there are snakes in our midst. Pitching my voice to drip with disdain, I turned a piercing glare upon Ethan and Brielle's ashen faces. Snake who've been siphoning profits into offshore accounts and orchestrating an illegal sale to corporate raiders, all in a selfish ploy to steal what isn't theirs. The room erupted in shocked gasps and furious murmurs. Ethan gaped at me in abject horror, his knees visibly trembling. Score 1 for catching the rats by surprise. But take heart, my friends, I continued, allowing a vindicated smile. For I've spent months unraveling this scheme and constructed a righteous counterattack to preserve the heart and soul of Connor Vineyards. And as we speak, law enforcement is en route to apprehend the conspirators and abate this betrayal once and for all. That caused another thunderous roar to swell, this one of cheers and applause from the assembled guests. Ethan and Brielle could only stand frozen, their traitorous aspirations rejected in the most grandiose, humiliating forum imaginable. This was more than just the death of their scheme, it was the public immolation of their dreams, their reputations irrevocably stained for all to witness. Smile widening to bask in their torment, I locked eyes with Ethan, allowing my voice to rise above the raucous din in one final damning declaration. And so ends the inglorious paths of those foolish enough to betray Connor Family Vineyards. The silence that followed my declaration was electric, charged with 1,000 unvoiced gasps and accusations. Every eye in the gala burned into Ethan and Brielle, the snakes exposed in their traitorous coils. Clutching the microphone, I drank in the moment, savoring their abject humiliation as event security closed in to apprehend them. There would be no escape, no last-minute reprieve to salvage their crumbling reputations. "You lying bitch!" Brielle exploded first, always the blazing tempest to Ethan's simmering tumult. Flecks of spittle flew from her snarling lips as she wheeled on me in impotent rage. "How dare you? After everything our families sacrificed to build this place up from nothing." A cruel laugh burst from my chest, mocking and utterly devoid of mercy. "Sacrificed?" I echoed back at her venomous glare. "By stealing and scheming behind my back to rob me of my rightful inheritance? If that's the extent of your sacrifices, then allow me to return the favor." Sweeping an arm out, I gestured to the assembled crowd staring in scandalized fascination. "Esteemed guests, I give you Brielle Evans and Ethan Baxter, a contemptible pair of vipers who not only embezzled funds and orchestrated an illegal sale, but deluded themselves into thinking I'd simply hand over my legacy to their greedy clutches once the money hit my accounts." A fresh torrent of gasps and whispers rippled through the room, judgment and damnation raining down on the exposed snakes. No corner of this prestigious venue would offer them refuge, only the unforgiving glare of a community outraged by their insidious betrayal. "Well, here's your wake-up call." I locked eyes with the fuming Brielle, jaw clenched to savor her swift descent into panicked realization. "The Connors don't fold to snakes or sell our souls so easily. We have a pride and resilience that parasites like you could never comprehend." Dismissing her with a contemptuous sneer, I turned my scathing address toward the squirming Ethan. "And you, my so-called husband-to-be orchestrating a con to strip me of everything I've sacrificed for. Tell me, were you even attempting to mask your disloyalty, or just stringing me along like a blissfully ignorant puppet?" Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but any protest withered on his ashen lips beneath my blistering glare. "Save your platitudes, we both know the truth. You saw an opportunity for an easy payday. Damn whoever's lives or legacies got chewed up along the way." My fingers stabbed with each enunciated syllable, driving the humiliation deeper. "Well, you miscalculated badly, Baxter, and now you'll reap the widespread ruination you've disgraced yourselves by earning." As if on cue, the ballroom doors flew open, revealing a grim-faced Marcia Blackwood flanked by county sheriff's deputies, the legal cavalry arriving to compound the conspirators' devastation. They swept forward as twin tidal waves of dread finally crested over Ethan and Brielle's masks of feigned innocence. Excuses and justifications died on their lips, choked off by the stark ramifications crashing down upon their elaborately orchestrated scheme. Ethan turned to me, momentarily unmasked in his desperation. "Avery, please." But I cut him off with a contemptuous slash of my hand. "I don't know who you are anymore, Ethan. Only that you're just another snake unworthy of my name or legacy." His shoulders slumped just before the deputies seized his arms, the dual blows of exposure and consequence robbing him of any final defiance. Fighting back a cruel smirk of satisfaction, I handed off the microphone to the approaching Marcia and stood tall, basking in the complete conquest over those who dared imperil everything I held sacred. The sight of Ethan and Brielle being led away in shackles amid a chorus of infuriated shouts branded itself into my memory like a searing brand. A watershed moment, their pathetic hopes and conniving snuffed out, the battlefield belonging solely to the righteous victor once more. In the days following the gala, a torrential downpour of consequences deluged Ethan and Brielle's shattered world. The dominoes I'd meticulously lined up for months toppled in devastating, unrelenting succession. First came the media crucifixion, a full-court blitz of skating exposés that left no damning stone unturned. Embezzlement figures, paper trails of illicit deals, and every unsavory allegation flooded the airwaves and newspapers. Then, the corporate clients and investors rapidly distanced themselves from the toxic fallout. Distributors and joint ventures severed ties as if the conniving snakes had developed a virulent, untreatable plague. Lucrative contracts evaporated overnight, closing off any potential lifelines or escape routes. Within a week, the once burgeoning empire Ethan and Brielle envisioned lay smoldering on the funeral pyre of their treacherous designs. Watching the dominoes spiral from my winery office's floor-to-ceiling windows, I sipped a crisp Chardonnay, smoky undertones from the Heritage Vineyards crop, complemented by the sweetness of hard-earned vindication. "It's all crumbling apart for them out there," Lucia murmured, mirroring my hawkish gaze. "Just like you said it would." "Of course." I swirled the glass, observing the pale liquid's lazy eddies. "Snakes like Ethan and Brielle slither on instinct and impulse. They can't help reverting to their vile natures. Snakes need to be defanged and rendered harmless before they can contaminate the surrounding environment." Lucia's brow furrowed as she processed my detached analysis. "And you're just okay with doing that to your own cousin? Your ex-fiancé?" A wintry smirk tugged at the corners of my lips. "I am the master of this vineyard, Lucia. Those sorts of personal entanglements and sentiments are luxuries I cannot afford to entertain, not when the stakes are so monumental." Shaking her head slowly, she shifted her gaze back outside. "I don't know how you have the stomach for it. All this, coldly dismantling their lives." "It's not about vengeance or settling scores," I replied evenly. This was always about upholding the values and legacy my father imparented upon these vines. Some degradation simply cannot be allowed to take root. A brief lull stretched between us as the enormity of the situation resonated. After a few thoughtful sips, I broke the silence. "We're in the final throes now. Ethan and Brielle's reputations are decimated beyond repair, their underhanded ambitions rendered stillborn." My finger traced the path of a large truck pulling away from a nearby warehouse, the last dribbles being siphoned off their illicit overseas accounts and asset seizures. Soon, their ill-gotten windfalls will be returned to their rightful place, and they'll be left as they began, common graspers stripped of all influence and credibility. A grim smile etched across my features as I envisioned them reaping the whirlwind of their own making. No prison could confine them as completely as the reputations and futures they'd willingly immolated on the altar of greed and treachery. Every eye would forever gaze upon them and see only the parasites who betrayed family and legacy for a quick payday, irredeemable snakes expelled from their padded Eden into the wilderness of permanent societal exile. A more comprehensive immolation than anything I could have orchestrated by sheer force of will. "It's the perfect karmic justice," I declared, clinking my glass against Lucia's in a muted toast. "They'll never hold power or influence in this valley or respected circles ever again." As the crystal chimed, my gaze drifted over the sprawling vineyards basking in the valley's reflected emerald glow. The spark of renewal and reinvigoration already gathered on the horizon, possibilities blossoming like a new bountiful harvest yet to be plucked. My family's righteous legacy endured, burnished anew while the snakes shriveled and expired. warnings to any who dared stake foolish claims against its roots. I would ensure the winery's spiritual heart stemmed strong and proud in the aftermath. This land and its fruits would continue upholding the honored Connor's name long after Ethan and Brielle faded from memory like the meaningless parasites they were. Order had been restored, karmic balance achieved with a ruthless, defensive precision. In the aftermath of Ethan and Brielle's disgrace, an unsettled quiet descended upon the vineyards, the calm before a new season of growth and rebirth took root. I stood alone amid the pruned vines, calloused fingers tracing the gnarled bark, as the first whispers of spring's rejuvenation danced on the crisp morning breeze. The heady, fertile scents served as a poignant reminder of the perpetual cycles governing our world. Decay always preceded new life flourishing from the fallow remnants. Closing my eyes, I inhaled deeply and permitted myself a faint, rueful smile. Ethan and Brielle were experiencing that harsh transition now, reaping the bitter harvest they'd sown through arrogance and betrayal. Once vitally connected to this sacred valley's lifeblood, they now found themselves permanently severed, withered husks left behind as the next evolution in Connor Vineyards progressed without them. "You look entirely too philosophical for someone clutching pruning shears." Anthony's gruff voice shook me from my reverie. I cracked open one eye to find the cantankerous old vintner shuffling up beside me, shotgun slung over his shoulder in his usual curmudgeonly fashion. "Just savoring the turning of seasons," I replied, nodding toward the replenished vines already studding with pale green buds, contemplating the cycles that govern all aspects of life. Anthony snorted, hawking a thick globule of phlegm into the pristine soil. "If you're searching for some grand metaphor about your jackass ex-fiancé and money-grubbing cousin, you're barking up the wrong goddamn vineyard." I fought back a chuckle, recognizing Anthony's typical bluster. "Not at all," I assured him, merely appreciating the moments of peace and clarity before we dive headlong into another demanding harvest. The brusque old man gave a grudging nod, squinting out over the sea of vibrant green shoots stretching toward the horizon. "Well, at least you finally evicted those parasitic rats mucking about in the wine cellar," he growled. "Spat enough dealing with aphids and mildew without vermin infestations threatening to strangle the whole operation." His crass wisdom struck an unexpected chord of sanguine appreciation within me. Somehow, Anthony's earthy pragmatism invoked the spirit of these lands more than any fragrant spring zephyr or poetic Renaissance musings could muster. Some legacies endured not through florid romanticisms, but by the hard-bitten determination to preserve their essence through every cycle of death and rebirth. Dad had that stubborn tenacity, and now, in the aftermath of my own battle to safeguard our proudest fruits, it seemed I had awoken to it as well. Nodding toward the distant winery complex peeking over the knolls, I voiced the conviction blossoming in my chest. "I want to expand our attractions and hospitality ventures," I declared. "Lavish new visitor experiences to take this place to even greater heights. Show the world we're not some quaint foothill boutique, but a leading cultural anchor as timeless as the grapes we cultivate." Anthony regarded me with one bushy-thing eyebrow arched. "Mighty ambitious talk, Miss Connor." A cantankerous smirk tugged at the corner of his cracked lips. "Hope you've got the grit to back it up once the snakes come slithering back." My fingers tightened around the pruning shear's worn wooden grip, drawing reassuring strength from its hewn permanence. "I'm counting on it," I replied with a feral grin. "The vines and soil have tasted treachery. They'll never allow anything besides the purest offerings to take nourishment again. Let the serpents bare their fangs, we'll simply lop off their skulls and continue flourishing as we were meant to." Anthony held my gaze for a long moment before unleashing a gravely chuckle that reverberated across the peaceful vineyard like a rollicking thunderclap. "Well, I'll be damned," he sputtered between wheezing guffaws. "You've finally grown a nice pair of auteur Italian grapes, haven't you, girl?" My laughter joined his, the twin reverberations mingling and trilling through the awakening vines, harbingers of the revitalized spirit and enterprise taking root. As our mirth gradually subsided into a comfortable quiet, I gazed out over my family's verdant domain with a renewed sense of purpose igniting within. No longer would I merely aim to preserve these hallowed lands. That passive existence felt unbefittingly hollow in the wake of my trials. From the ashes of duplicity and desecration, a new, more ambitious path beckoned to be forged. One that would elevate Connor Vineyards to unprecedented glories and esteem its founder could scarcely have envisioned. But I sensed Dad's spirit smiling down upon the endeavor, regardless, for he would surely recognize the resilience and singular drive propelling his heir's ascent from turmoil to triumph. The snakes had been vanquished. Now it was time for the phoenix to stretch its wings and soar toward new promised harvests. "You're useless, Layla. Absolutely useless," Ronan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. I fought back the tears stinging my eyes, refusing to show weakness in front of his family. 7 months pregnant, I had felt a wave of dizziness wash over me and needed to sit down. Instead of concern, my husband's reaction was filled with disdain. "Look at her, can't even stand up straight carrying my child." Ronan's parents, Mason and Lila, remained stone-faced, offering no defense. The rest of the family averted their eyes, an uncomfortable silence filling the room. It was supposed to be a celebratory dinner, bringing the extended family together before the baby's arrival. But like most family gatherings, it became another exhibition of Ronan's cruelty towards me. "Your grandchild," I corrected him sharply. "Or did you forget I'm carrying your daughter?" Ronan rolled his eyes. "If it was a son, it might actually be worth something." Gasps rippled through the room, but Ronan seemed unfazed by his callous remark. I felt a sharp kick from my unborn daughter, as if she could sense her father's indifference. Mustering all my strength, I rose to my feet, steadying myself against the table. "How dare you diminish the value of your own child before she's even born?" Ronan barked out a laugh. "Value? You've contributed nothing of value, Layla. I'm the one who built this family, this company. What have you done besides be a dead weight?" His words cut deep, dredging up years of belittling comments, demeaning behavior I had endured. But this time felt different. A line had been crossed. As I looked around at his family's impassive faces, I realized they didn't see me as one of their own, just a vessel for Ronan's heir, at least until he decided I had outlived my use. That's when I caught Sienna's eye from across the room. My sister-in-law offered a subtle nod of solidarity, the hint of a defiant smirk playing across her lips. In that moment, I knew she recognized Ronan's manipulation for what it was, toxic and abusive. "You're right, Ronan," I said steadily. "I haven't contributed anything of value." I paused, letting the weight of my next words sink in. "Not to you, at least." His brow furrowed in confusion as I turned my focus to the rest of the family. "But this child, this daughter you've already dismissed, she is valuable. She's my future, a future free from any of you." The room fell into an uneasy hush as I mustered every ounce of conviction. I'm done being treated as worthless. My daughter and I deserve better. With that, I strode out of the room, the dull roar of Ronan's objections fading behind me. A weight had lifted, and for the first time in a long while, I felt in control of my own destiny. The path ahead was uncertain, but no longer would I accept being diminished and devalued. After years of allowing Ronan's toxic presence to define me, I was finally ready to redefine myself and show my daughter what it truly means to be a woman of strength. No more complacency or fear, only determination to rise above. In the days following that fateful dinner, I found myself questioning everything about my marriage to Ronan. His callous disregard for our unborn daughter laid bare the true depths of his cruelty and lack of empathy. This man, who was supposed to be my partner for life, had reduced me to little more than an object, a disposable vessel for producing his heir. But I was done being disposed of. That night, after leaving his vitriolic family behind, I had marched straight to the home office and began digging into our finances. What I uncovered shook me to my core. Evidence of Ronan's rampant financial mismanagement and deceit that spanned years. Hidden offshore accounts, falsified business records, illegal money trails, all carefully obscured. "You lying snake," I muttered, poring over the damning documents. Just then I heard the telltale click of his study door opening. Well, look who's still awake burning the midnight oil." Ronan sauntered in, arf thinly veiled derision lacing his words. "I figured you'd be too busy wallowing after your little tantrum the other night." My hands trembled with rage, clutching the financial records like a shield. You're one to talk about tantrums. Your own toddler outbursts have funded this. I shoved the documents towards him. Care to explain all this, dear husband? Ronan's eyes widened as he flipped through the incriminating pages. For a split second, panic flashed across his face before his expression contorted into one of snide amusement. Finally did some digging, did you? He chuckled darkly. I'll give you this much. You're not as big of an idiot as I thought. Don't play dumb with me, I spat. I know about the money laundering, the shady business deals, all of it. You've been lying to me from the start. Ronan simply shrugged, unperturbed. So, those were necessary evils to get to where I am now. All you had to do was play the role of the devoted little wife. But you always did have trouble following directions. His brazen admission, devoid of any morsel of guilt or shame, was like a viper's strike to my heart. How could I have been so blind, so utterly naive to the depths of Ronan's moral depravity? You selfish, heartless bastard, I seethed, fists clenched. Did you ever love me at all? Or was I always just a means to an end in your grand game of lies and deceit? A cruel smirk played across his thin lips. Now you're catching on, but you're giving yourself too much credit, pet. You were a convenient accessory, a pretty ornament to adorn my winning success story. Nothing more. White-hot anger flooded my veins as the weight of his treachery washed over me in waves. This man didn't deserve an ounce of my loyalty or affection, not after everything he'd done, all the ways he'd betrayed and belittled me. And in that moment, I made a vow to myself and to my unborn daughter. I would bring this whole rotten edifice crashing down around him. Ronan wanted to see me as worthless, as nothing more than a means to an end. Fine, I would show him just how ruinous being underestimated could be. Rising to my feet, I met his cold stare with white-hot defiance blazing in my eyes. You're going to regret the day you ever crossed me, Ronan. This... I waved the documents with contempt. All of this is going to be your undoing. No more hiding, no more lies. I'm going to make sure everyone sees you for the soulless snake that you truly are. Ronan let out a contemptuous bark of laughter, seemingly unfazed by my declaration of war, but I could see the slightest flicker of uncertainty in those beady eyes of his. Good, the first embers of fear had been stoked. My path was now clear. It was time to rally my forces, gather my allies, and enact the grand unraveling of Ronan Jacob's carefully cultivated lies. The reversal of his ill-gotten fortunes was going to be deliciously karmic, and I would be the orchestrator of his downfall, just as he had been the architect of my dehumanization. The great game of revenge was only just beginning. In the aftermath of my explosive confrontation with Ronan, I found myself at a crossroads. His web of deceit surrounding the family business was so intricately spun, taking him down would require more than just my resolve. I needed an inside source, an ally with intimate knowledge to counteract his uncle's shadowy machinations. That's when Sienna entered the picture. My sister-in-law had been sidelined by Ronan and the family elders for years, deemed too headstrong and independent for their antiquated tastes. But her marginalization shielded her from their corruption, allowing her to see the rot festering at the core with striking clarity. I reached out to her a few days after discovering Ronan's illicit financial records, suggesting we meet for lunch to catch up. Sienna, ever perceptive, seemed to sense the weight behind my request. So what's really going on, Layla? She asked once we were seated at a quiet cafe, her eyes narrowed with cautious curiosity. This can't just be a social call after what went down at your dad's place. Exhaling slowly, I pulled out the now dog-eared folder and slid it across the table towards her. See for yourself. Ronan's lies run much deeper than any of us realized. Sienna's brow furrowed as she flipped through the damning pages, her expression oscillating between disbelief and anger. When she finally looked up at me, her green eyes were blazing with righteous fury. That arrogant, chauvinistic prick, she hissed, slamming the folder shut. I knew he was a bastard, but this is a new low, even for him. A rueful smile tugged at the corner of my lips. It felt vindicating to have someone finally see Ronan's treachery for what it was. You and me both. That's why I need your help taking him down. Sienna cocked an eyebrow quizzically. My help? Why come to me? Because you're one of the few people with a frontline view into the family's dealings, I said frankly. With your insight into their illegal activities, we'd have a better chance of exposing Ronan's lies and watching the whole corrupt edifice crumble. For a long moment, Sienna studied me appraisingly before letting out a bitter chuckle. Gotta hand it to you. You've got a set of steel ovaries going up against Ronan like this. Her gaze turned flinty, burning with years of repressed resentment towards my husband and his family. I'm in. It's high time that misogynistic prick got taken down a few pegs. Relief washed over me, knowing I had a co-conspirator, and a fiercely capable one at that. With Sienna's insider knowledge combined with my evidence, we would be an undeniable force to be reckoned with. So what's the plan? She asked, leaning in conspiratorially. How do you want to dismantle this cancer infecting our family? A feral grin spread across my face as I laid out my initial strategy. Lawsuits, information leaks to the press, back-channel communications to law enforcement, nothing was off the table. Like Jenga pieces, we would systematically extract the foundational blocks underlying Ronan's empire until the entire decrepit tower came crashing down around him. Sienna listened intently, offering insights and recommendations along the way. Our partnership was quickly solidifying into a potent alliance, two wronged women joining forces to enact poetic justice. You know there's no turning back after this, right? Sienna cautioned once I finished laying out my plan. Ronan's going to come after us, after you, with everything he has left. I felt my daughter kick insistently from within my womb, as if lending her strength and conviction to my cause. With a resolute nod, I met Sienna's gaze head-on. Let him try, I said, cold determination lacing my voice. I'm done running scared. It's time for Ronan to learn what happens when you back a mother into a corner. Sienna flashed me a wolfish grin, her eyes glinting with feral approval. Well then, let's make that bastard pay. And with that, the gears of our intricately weaved con were set in motion. Ronan's downfall was now inevitable. He just didn't know it yet. With Sienna as my co-conspirator, the wheels were in motion to demolish Ronan's empire of lies and deceit. But exposing him wouldn't be a simple task. We needed to lay the groundwork meticulously, shoring up our defenses while weakening his position through strategic strikes. Over the following weeks, Sienna and I became a well-oiled machine. She provided insider intelligence on the family's illegal dealings, while I leveraged my financial evidence to start building a comprehensive case against Ronan. Money trails, damning documentation, back-channel whispers to law enforcement, everything was falling into place. I also began lining up allies in preparation for the inevitable battle to come. Some were easy to recruit, like Sienna's younger brother Caleb, who had long resented Ronan's boorish behavior. Others were more hesitant, but the weight of the evidence against my husband ultimately proved convincing. This is some heavy stuff, Lay, Jen, my best friend since childhood, muttered as she pored over the paper trail detailing Ronan's fraud. You know he's going to fight this tooth and nail, right? That's the plan, I replied grimly. He's going to realize just how big of a mistake it was underestimating what a woman's scorn can accomplish. Jen shook her head in disbelief. I knew that asshole was a piece of work, but money laundering? Illegal business dealings? Jesus. Her gaze turned serious as she looked up at me. You sure you're ready for the fallout that comes with taking him down like this? He could try to take everything. Your money, the baby. My hand instinctively went to my swollen belly as I felt my daughter shift inside me. That was the entire crux of this mission, wasn't it? To ensure she would never have to suffer the same toxic mistreatment I had endured. To build her a life free of Ronan's poisonous influence. He doesn't get to decide what's best for my child, not anymore, I said firmly. If he wants a war, he's going to get one, and I don't intend to lose. Jen studied me appraisingly for a long moment before giving a resolute nod. Then you've got my full support. Let's take that bastard down. With more allies rallying to the cause, our efforts started bearing fruit. A scathing expose in the local paper cast scrutiny on Ronan's business affairs. Anonymous tips triggered preliminary IRS and SEC investigations. I could sense the walls closing in around him, his confidence gradually fracturing. It all came to a head one evening when Ronan stormed into the house, his face contorted into a mask of frothing rage. You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? He snarled, violently slamming his briefcase onto the table. You had to go and poke your nose where it didn't belong. I stared at him impassively, cradling my pregnant belly. That's rich, coming from you. I'm simply bringing your shady dealings into the light. You conniving little bitch! Ronan's sudden roar made me flinch. You think you've won? That you can take everything I've built and destroy it on a whim? He closed the distance between us, his meaty hand gripping my arm in a vice-like grip. I'll bury you before you can take one more step, do you hear me? This family, this life, it's all mine. You're nothing. His spittle flew in my face as I met his crazed stare with steely defiance. We'll see about that. With a disgusted grunt, Ronan shoved me away and stormed out, leaving me to rub the spot where his fingers had dug into my flesh. I felt my daughter kick anxiously, as if she could sense the tension and rage radiating off her father. Don't worry, sweetie, I murmured, gently rubbing my belly to soothe her. That's the last time he'll ever get to hurt us. The game was afoot, the battle lines clearly drawn. There would be no turning back now. Ronan's ignorant arrogance had opened the door for his downfall. Soon, very soon, everything he'd schemed and clawed for would be ashes at his feet. And from those ashes, I would rise, his conquering phoenix, mercilessly guiding the path of his self-immolation. Despite Ronan's blustering threats, Sienna and I refused to let up the pressure. With our meticulous groundwork laid over the past weeks, all we needed was the right catalyst to detonate the explosive truth and bring the full force of our retaliation crashing down. That spark arrived in the most unlikely of places, a goddamn family event, of all things. It was one of those obnoxious high society galas the Jacobs clan used for thinly veiled vanity showcasing. A garish display of old money and entitlement under the guise of charity that made my skin crawl. Ronan, desperate to maintain appearances, had all but demanded my attendance, claiming it would soften the growing PR onslaught against him. So there I was, 7.5 months pregnant, squeezed into an uncomfortably tight dress and trotted out like some grotesque show pony to help resuscitate my husband's wilting image. The hypocrisy was galling, but I played along, for now. The night itself was a sordid parade of self-congratulatory speeches and pathetic social climbing, exactly as I'd expected. I found myself growing increasingly lightheaded and nauseous, thanks to a combination of my condition and the sickeningly opulent atmosphere. Sienna, I need some air, I muttered, struggling to conceal my discomfort. Being around these vapid vultures is making me ill. You just say the word and we're out of here, she replied with a reassuring squeeze of my arm. This whole charade is utter bullshit anyway. Nodding gratefully, I excused myself from the overcrowded ballroom and made my way towards the balcony doors, each step feeling heavier than the last. I was nearly there when a grimy hand clamped around my elbow, whipping me around forcefully. Just where do you think you're going? Ronan sneered, his tuxedo hanging open sloppily and his breath reeking of whiskey. Your little disappearing act is going to make us look bad. I wrenched my arm free from his grasp, defiant anger flaring. Us? Don't flatter yourself, Ronan. You're the only one with an image to protect here, and at great cost, it seems. He threw his head back with a contemptuous bark of laughter. Oh, spare me the self-righteous melodrama, would you? I'm doing what's necessary to maintain the family legacy. Your legacy is mired in lies and illegal money, you degenerate. I shot back, fighting the wave of dizziness washing over me. How many more laws do you plan to break just to feather your filthy nest? Ronan's face contorted in an ugly sneer. Watch your tone when speaking to me, you ungrateful whore. The vile insult was cut off as a searing pain lanced through my abdomen, forcing me to double over with a strangled cry. Instantly, the room started spinning sickeningly as I clutched at my stomach. Oh God, something's wrong. I whimpered through gritted teeth, panic seizing my chest. The baby. I think she's coming. For one infinitesimal moment, Ronan's scowl slipped just enough for the briefest flicker of concern to register on his face. But it was quickly extinguished as his mask of disdain slammed back into place. Of course you'd choose now for this pathetic drama queen act, he growled, making no move to help me. Just another attention grab like always. I could scarcely believe his callous reaction through the haze of agony racking my body. Ronan, please. I need help. From somewhere behind me I heard Sienna's urgent voice calling my name as she rushed to my side. Layla! Oh my God! What's going on? Her eyes went wide with panic as she quickly assessed the situation. We need to get you to a hospital now." Ronan simply stood back, arms folded across his chest, with a sneer of derision painted across his smug features. "Don't bother," he spat venomously. "She's clearly just trying to stir up another scene. Pathetic even for you, Layla." White-hot rage cut through the pain as Sienna helped me up, glaring daggers at my wretched husband. "You heard the lady. She needs medical attention, asshole!" she shouted, somehow managing to steady my trembling form. "Are you really that much of a bastard that you're going to let your own child suffer?" His only response was a disdainful curl of his lip and a dismissive wave of his hand. And in that moment, any lingering shred of affection or loyalty I might have harbored for Ronan Jacobs dissipated into the ether. Through the tumultuous storm of agony and mounting rage, one thought rang out with piercing clarity. This petty, narcissistic monster could no longer be allowed to slither through this life unchecked. Not after everything he'd done, every reprehensible betrayal and cruelty I had endured at his hands. As Sienna half-carried, half-dragged me out of that wretched gala, the air thick with horrified murmurs from onlookers, I knew with every fiber of my being that there would be no quarter given, no more playing by his rules, operating within his corrupt boundaries. From this night forward, the delicate campaign of attrition would give way to an all-out scorched earth offensive. Ronan's downfall was no longer a question of if, but when. And I would be the White Walkyrie leading the charge over the charred remains of his pathetic existence until only ash and ruin remained. After the disastrous gala where Ronan so callously disregarded my health and our unborn child's well-being, any pretense of civility between us disintegrated into acrid dust. With Sienna's help, I had been rushed to the hospital, the doctors just barely managing to halt my premature labor. But that horrific night proved to be the flashpoint, the spark that ignited the wildfire of our intricately laid revenge plot. While I recovered under Sienna's watchful care, she began systematically executing the final phases of our operation, unloading salvo after salvo of damning evidence, whistleblower accounts, and criminal documentation onto the appropriate channels. Authorities, journalists, corporate watchdogs, no stone was left unturned as she mercilessly exposed the staggering depths of Ronan's duplicity and criminality. The dominoes began falling rapidly after that, one by one, until an unstoppable chain reaction took hold. SEC investigations gave way to federal grand juries, which then triggered disastrous civil lawsuits and IRS tax fraud probes. What had once been a contained snuff operation ballooned into an all-consuming inferno that threatened to engulf Ronan's entire empire of lies. And at the center of that conflagration stood the man himself, eyes bulging with impotent rage as he watched everything he'd conned and swindled for decades up in acrimonious smoke. "You meddlesome bitch," he roared, slamming his meaty fist onto the desk during one of his increasingly frequent tantrums. "You've ruined everything. My life's work, our legacy. It's all ashes because of your insipid vendetta." I regarded him stoically from across the office, completely unmoved by his theatrics. "You have no one to blame but yourself, Ronan. Your greed and hubris were your own undoing, not me." His beady eyes narrowed to slits as he rose from behind his desk on unsteady feet. "Don't play innocent with me, Layla. I know you were behind this. All of this." He gestured wildly at the stacks of legal notices and indictments littering every surface, debris from the smoldering remains of his diseased empire. "You and that venomous snake, Sienna." "We simply exposed the truth you worked so hard to bury," I countered coolly. "Did you really think you could run this criminal farce indefinitely without any consequences?" Ronan bared his teeth in an approximation of a snarl as he closed the distance between us. Up close, I could smell the reek of cheap whiskey and nervous sweat wafting off his disheveled form, a pitiful shell of the formerly sleek, intimidating con man whose fear I had lived in for so many years. "You arrogant little—" His slurred insult was cut off as a tiny, mewling cry pierced the air. My newborn daughter shifting restlessly in her carrier beside me. I shot him a withering glare, squaring my shoulders protectively. "That's enough out of you. Not another vulgarity in front of my child." I fixed him with an icy stare, letting the unspoken threat resonate. "You've inflicted enough trauma on this family." For a long, tense moment, we simply stared each other down, the snarling, feral beast backed into an inescapable corner, and the predator calmly observing its final throes. At last, Ronan seemed to wilt beneath the weight of crushing defeat clouding his gaze. "Damn you," he spat bitterly, slumping back against his desk with a dull thud. "Damn you and that bastard child to hell." As if on cue, Sienna strode into the room, eyes flashing as she took in the tense scene before her. "Everything okay in here?" Shooting Ronan one final look of disgust, I turned to face my co-conspirator and gave a tight nod. "Never better. Just tying up some loose ends with the soon-to-be former Mr. Jacobs." A wicked grin split Sienna's features as she regarded her disgraced cousin with undisguised glee. "Well, don't let me interrupt the reckoning. By all means, allow me to join in verbally eviscerating the sniveling husk of this pathetic, arrogant worm." She leveled a mocking glare at Ronan. "Go on, you gaping asshole. What other lies do you have left to try and peddle?" Ronan simply glowered in impotent rage, clenching and unclenching his fists. The faintest mutters of denial and heated curses escaped his trembling lips, but it was obvious the fight had left him. His will, his decades-long charade of power and dominance, had finally been irrevocably shattered. Turning my back to his crumpled, mumbling form, I bent down to tenderly scoop up my slumbering infant daughter, cradling her against my chest as a fierce wave of protectiveness washed over me. She was my everything now, my sole purpose, and all that mattered in this miserable world. And in that moment, I silently swore to whatever higher power that may exist, that my precious girl would never have to endure the trauma of Ronan's toxicity or fall under the twisted clutches of his family legacy. The karma he had wrought through his lifetime of malice and depravity was his cross to bear, not hers. "Come on, Sienna, let's go home. There's nothing left for us among the ashes of Ronan's ruin." I spared one last contemptuous glance over my shoulder at the wretched, sniveling husk that was once my husband. This one can stew in his self-made purgatory alone. With a curt nod, Sienna fell into step beside me as we strode from the smoldering ruins of Ronan's decrepit empire. Behind us, I could feel his seething gaze burning impotently into the back of my skull. But I didn't falter, didn't dare look back. There was nothing for me amid that scorched earth, only the bright future awaiting my daughter and I beyond the caustic smoke of karmic justice. In the aftermath of Ronan's spectacular downfall, the shockwaves rippled through every facet of our lives. The legal and financial fallout had left his family's empire in irreparable ruin. Corporate entities dissolved, assets seized, reputations permanently disgraced. And at the eye of this hurricane of destruction stood Ronan himself, a bitter, sneering shell temporarily insulated by the last vestiges of his ill-gotten wealth as he licked his wounds. But even that protection was a rapidly dwindling facade. The incoming crush of criminal charges and civil litigation saw to that. I lost count of the visits from court officers, federal agents, and process servers darkening my doorstep, each one armed with another ream of subpoenas and legal filings squarely aimed at dismantling what little remained of Ronan's crumbling facade. His standard modus operandi of dismissive sneers and hollow legal threats gave way to panicked outbursts, increasingly erratic behavior, and even interventions from law enforcement when his rage spiraled out of control. "This isn't over, Layla," he roared at me through a haze of spittle during one such unhinged meltdown, eyes wild like a cornered animal. "I'll bury you in litigation for the rest of your miserable life. You'll never be free of me." Staring impassively back at him through the doorway, I didn't so much as flinch as I cradled our infant daughter protectively against my chest. "Is that so? Because from where I'm standing, it seems your options for retaliation are rapidly evaporating." "Don't get smug with me, you disloyal little cunt." Ronan's voice cracked with raw fury. "Everything I had, everything I built, it's all in ruins now, because of you. But I'll make sure you suffer just as badly before this is through. Mark my words." "Tell me, Ronan, do you honestly think threatening me is going to restore your dignity at this point?" I arched a challenging brow. "I've thoroughly dismantled any illusion of you being an intimidating presence. You're already living your worst nightmare, destitute and alone, unmourned and reviled for your reprehensible actions." He opened his mouth to retort, but I cut him off with an imperious sweep of my free hand. Enough with the hollow bravado. We both know that deep down, you're nothing more than a coward and a charlatan whose house of cards has finally collapsed under its own weight. Pausing, I allowed the weight of my next words to resonate. I'd tell you to give my regards to your cellmates, but something tells me they'll be able to smell the stench of your vileness a mile away. For a fleeting instant, something akin to naked fear flickered behind Ronan's eyes, but the split-second glimpse into what fragile sliver of humanity he had left was quickly snuffed out, his ferocious mask of feral defiance slamming back into place. "You'll get yours, Layla. One way or another, I'll make sure of that," he snarled. "No bitch takes everything from Ronan Jacobs and gets away with it unscathed." "Is that so?" A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. "We'll see about that." With one last contemptuous glare, Ronan whirled on his heel and stormed off, the once imposing figure cutting an increasingly diminutive presence with each passing day. I watched him leave unflinchingly, the weight of victory granting me a tranquil resolve I had once struggled to find amid his toxic shadow. As the fury of his exit faded into stony silence, my daughter began fussing softly against my chest. Gently shushing her, I nuzzled her downy head and hummed a tender tune until her squirms subsided into peaceful slumber once more. In that simple, serene moment, my purpose and drive crystallized into an inviolable truth. Everything I had endured, every wound and sacrifice along this tumultuous path, had all been for her. To build a world where she would never know the corrosive touch of Ronan's cruelty or malignance. A world where her limitless potential and soaring spirit would be nurtured, not bound in chains. It was then that I made an irrevocable vow, one that would guide the next phase of mine and my daughter's shared journey towards healing and vindication. I'm going to make sure that he spends the rest of his empty days withering behind bars where he belongs, I murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to my little girl's head. And in doing so, I'll cleanse every last vestige of his poison from our lives. You'll never have to know the person I was before you came along, sweetie. For far too long, the scales had been tipped decisively in Ronan's favor, my light perpetually eclipsed by the suffocating gravity of his toxicity. But in dismantling his vile empire through ruthless, strategic strikes, the karmic rebalancing had begun. Now it was time to reject his cancerous influence entirely and reclaim my destiny as the self-actualized woman and mother I was always meant to become. No more entertaining his hollow legal threats or humoring his pathetic machinations from the sidelines. No more relics from the life he had claimed for me through subjugation and fear. It was time for Ronan Jacobs to at long last reap the full consequences of his cruelty and deception, without mercy or compromise. Only then could my new chapter truly begin, a tale authored by my own steadfast convictions, free from the shackles of his arrogance and malice. As the first rays of dawn crested over the horizon, my path forward was bathed in brilliant clarity. There would be no steering from this inexorable road, no wavering amid the scattered ashes of Ronan's shattered reality. The metamorphosis was complete. Like a phoenix born anew from the purifying annihilation of his transgressions, my wings were finally unfurled and poised to carry us both into a future of boundless possibility. And this time there was no force in existence that could extinguish the radiant flame of justice and redemption blazing before us. The days and weeks following Ronan's disgrace blurred together in a whirlwind of activity as I systematically extricated every remaining tentacle of his poisonous presence from our lives. The divorce proceedings were inevitably messy and drawn out, colored by one bad faith legal maneuver after another, as my now thoroughly disgraced ex-husband grasped at any remaining shred of leverage. But flanked by an impeccably prepared legal team and emboldened by Sienna's stalwart support, his pathetic delaying tactics proved futile. In the end, the courts had little sympathy to spare for a man whose reprehensible actions had been laid bare so publicly. Within 6 months, the divorce decree was ironclad. Full custody of our daughter, a sizable monetary settlement from what meager funds remained attachable after all the asset seizures, and every last thread connecting me to that rotting family legacy unceremoniously severed. I was finally free from the insidious manipulation, the demeaning insults and abuse, the generational cycle of toxicity Ronan had tried so desperately to entrench us both in. As the last mote of legal dust scattered, I felt an unbearable weight dissipate, replaced by an electrifying surge of possibility and newfound liberty. This life, this miraculous second chance, was ours and ours alone to author. No longer would I allow Ronan's cancerous presence to dictate the boundaries of our realm. With my meager savings and the settlement funds, I wasted no time leaving that wretched city in the rear view, desperate to put as many miles between us and those harrowing memories as possible. A quaint but comfortable home in the mountains was my chosen fresh start, a place to breathe and find tranquility among the hushed pines and crisp alpine air. Sienna came with me on that maiden voyage to my new sanctuary, helping me settle in and bearing witness to the dawning of this new reality we had fought so tenaciously to manifest. "Not bad for your stakes of the winnings, all things considered," she remarked with a roguish grin as we lounged on the cabin's spacious back patio, our contented niece gurgling happily in her arms. "Just a consolation prize, really," I replied with a dismissive wave of my hand, lazily sipping a glass of crisp white wine as I surveyed the breathtaking vista of evergreen trees rolling off into the distance. "The true bounty is the regained peace of mind, something money alone could never buy." Sienna shot me an appraising look, nodding slowly. "You've come a long way from that demure, broken-winged sparrow Ronan tried so hard to keep clipped all those years. Not sure I've ever seen a phoenix's ascension up close like this before." "Just be glad you were on my side of the bonfire when this whole warpath started," I chuckled ruefully, twisting in my seat to meet her gaze. "I shudder to think how ruthless the retribution would have been if you'd been added to the list of co-conspirators." We shared a loaded look, one that spoke volumes to the depths of conviction and camaraderie that had driven our crusade of righteous vengeance over these past months. My unlikely ally had become an indispensable confidant and comrade-in-arms through the harshest throes of Ronan's sinister downfall. A true sister in every sense of the word. But enough about that narcissistic shit stain. I'm over the moon just to be putting that whole cancerous saga behind me," Sienna declared with an emphatic clink of her glass against mine. "Here's to breathing that crisp, rejuvenating mountain air and never having to look over our shoulders again." "I'll drink to that," I said with a contented sigh, leaning back to bask in the warmth of the mid-afternoon sun filtering through the trees. For the first time in a long while, I truly felt at peace. Over the ensuing months, I steadily regained my footing and settled into my new normal of single motherhood, with Sienna's unflagging moral and logistical support by my side every step of the way. There were still days where I would be struck by sudden pangs of loathing or repressed trauma over all Ronan had put me through, phantom echoes of his scathing taunts and demeaning insults rattling like pinballs through my psyche. Yet with every passing week, those haunting whispers grew more faint, more powerless against the brilliant blaze of self-actualization and fulfillment illuminating my path forward. Gradually, steadily, I rediscovered the pieces of the woman I had once been, before Ronan's poisonous influence had so thoroughly leached her ambitions and self-worth down to empty husks. With my daughter as my unbridled source of inspiration and Sienna's sage guidance, the core pillars of my identity were steadily being rebuilt from the ground up. I dove headfirst into pursuing the high-stakes financial career I had abandoned when the Jacobs clan asserted their odious sway over my life's trajectory. The fire to establish myself as a singularly brilliant market analyst and consultant raged hotter than ever before. Within 2 years, I had clawed my way back into the cutthroat arena of high finance, rapidly establishing a hard-won reputation as a fierce, savvy negotiator with an incisive and unflinching market instinct. Seemingly overnight, my fledgling boutique consultancy went from a homespun side hustle to a force to be reckoned with on the national stage. "You've got a preternatural gift for this stuff, you know?" Sienna remarked in an odd tone one evening as I exited yet another lucrative teleconference, 6 figures richer for an hour's worth of counsel. "The sheer brass one's on you to step back into this shark's den after everything you went through." I simply shrugged, my gaze drifting over to where my 5-year-old daughter lay curled up in contented slumber on the couch, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "They tried to break me, and nearly succeeded, mostly because I allowed them to. I'll be damned if I squander this second lease on life by needlessly limiting myself again. The raw truth of those words hung in the air for a heavy pause as we both watched my little girl's peaceful rising and falling beneath her tattered blanket. Besides, I've got to set the bar high so this little munchkin knows just how brilliant and tenacious she can grow up to be, I continued wistfully. Her future is the only inheritance that matters to me now. The rest is just excess noise. Meeting Sienna's proud gaze with a resolute nod of affirmation, I felt the last vestiges of doubt and fear permanently slough off, like the molted skin of a transcendent serpent. What had once been shameful shackles had been meticulously reworked into brilliant new armor, steeled against the harsh realities that still lurked beyond this sanctum. Because out there in that tumultuous world, the specter of Ronan Jacobs and his ilk still festered. Venal, vicious aberrations perpetually locked in conflict with the strength and integrity I now embodied. And while his individual chapter had been scribed into ignominious history, that eternal crusade waged on in others. But I was more than ready to face those battles anew with a cleansed spirit and crystalline clarity of purpose, to uplift and cultivate that divine spark of potential until it erupted into an all-consuming wildfire, burning away every last mote of indignity and fear. No more poisoned births or anguished gasps for air amid that choking miasma of societal toxicity. Only the radiant promise of new dawns, to be ushered in by champions of change and retribution, unshackled from the anchors of oppression. Because on that day, standing at the precipice of our boldly reclaimed destiny, I was no longer prey, just the merciless apex predator, continually reborn in a blaze of glory.